Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I'm actually a couple minutes early this morning, which is almost unheard of. If you don't know me or you're just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a wellness advocate, a volunteer in my community, a runner, a jazzerciser. I own an online activewear boutique, and I'm also studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. And I started Wellness Wednesday because I have spent my life dealing with depression and anxiety, and found that when you get together with people who are your peers and you share information, everybody usually benefits from that in some form or fashion. And wellness is a big umbrella that covers a lot of topics. So I started this a little over 100 episodes ago, and it's been phenomenal. And I love and appreciate the messages that I get about some of the topics that are covered. And we cover a lot of different things. We just try to stay away from politics and negativity. So last week's episode, I forgot to mention, if you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, feel free to still make comments or ask questions. You can message me if you have a topic you'd like to see me cover in the future. I love to learn, so anytime I get an opportunity to dig into something new, I'm thrilled about it. And last week, being the end of September, I spoke on suicide prevention because September was Suicide Prevention Month. And if you didn't get a chance to see that, I will drop the link to that video in the comments, and you can always find it on my Facebook page under the videos tab. All my Wellness Wednesdays are there, but if you're not sure, if you're looking for something specific and you want to know if I've covered it already or not, feel free to message me. And if I have, I will find it. And if I haven't, then I will maybe look into it for a future Wellness Wednesday topic. So while I was speaking on suicide prevention, we were watching Helene's path. That was Wednesday, and Thursday was the day that Helene hit for those of us in Florida. And as most everyone knows, it got pretty ugly in a lot of unexpected ways. I don't know that. I think that those of us in Florida knew what was possible, but I think there's a lot of other states that were impacted by Helene in ways that no one ever really imagined. And it's a mess. And because of that, there is a range of emotions that everyone is experiencing right now. So today we're going to focus on trying to navigate that emotional aftermath, whether you were directly impacted, are overwhelmed by or are just overwhelmed by the devastation and struggling with survivor guilt, which is an actual thing. And all of those feelings are valid. So, we're going to start out with some common emotional stuff that goes on in cases like this. And we've seen a lot of this in other disasters, sometimes natural, sometimes not natural. But what happens is we're experiencing, especially the people that have been directly impacted, a lot of grief and loss. And this goes beyond the physical grief and loss. And there's unfortunately, a lot of that going on right now too. But we're talking about beyond the physical, beyond the loss of people, God help us, or homes or belongings. But we're talking about the other things like a sense of safety, a sense of routine, loss of a lifestyle, personal displacement, all of those things that come along with not being able to stay in your home, having lost personal belongings, possibly people, loved ones. Maybe if you've been living on the coast for a while, that sense that you just have had enough. This was like the one that put you over the top, and you don't know if you can continue that lifestyle, which is what I meant by lifestyle loss. So there's a lot of grief and loss that comes along with all of this. Grief is not specific to losing a loved one. Grief is specific to losing ideas and things, and just like I said, a general sense of safety, routine, lifestyle. All of those things can be associated with grief. People experience grief not just when they lose things or lose people, but when they lose jobs, when they lose relationships of any kind. We often see it in cases where people are burglarized, their homes are invaded or burglarized. They lose that sense of safety, and it takes a while to get it back. And the same thing happens in the case of disasters like this. depending on the level of the disaster and the level of impact, we lose that sense of safety. Our routine goes way out of left field, and goes into orbit basically. And there's just a lot of things that come in there. So what happens when that's going on is that our perception of everything is off. And it's off because we're seeing it through this lens of loss. And sometimes through a lens of not being in control, and just kind of just lashing out and needing to find control somewhere, which unfortunately means that a lot of things that would normally be perceived as personal attacks are, especially in this day of social media where it's easy to sit behind a keyboard and make judgment. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of overwhelm. There's a lot of what's called a stacking effect, where, and I apologize if my internet just told me it's trying to reconnect, so I'm not sure what's going on this morning. I'll just be grateful I have internet so I can be here with you today. So there's kind of a stacking effect. So it starts with the terror of the impending storm, and then the loss and the damage, and then the cleanup, and then the what's next, and all the decisions and things that have to be made. So what we experience is an overwhelm that is beyond comprehension for a lot of us, because of that stacking effect. And then there's some people who aren't directly impacted, that experience survival guilt. And I think one of the biggest places we saw this was after 9/11, where people who weren't directly impacted were watching the news and they were frozen in horror. Good morning, Miss Carla. They were frozen in horror watching what was happening and wishing they could be there to help, and not being able to see a way. And the same kind of thing is going on right now with those of us that are watching. Those of us that weren't directly impacted are watching the cleanup efforts, and we're watching the flooding and the devastation on the news, and we're frozen. We're frozen with, we want to help, we don't know how, and we feel bad because we were spared in whatever form or fashion that looks like, whether it's a storm or a terrorist attack or anything like that. So just know that even if you are somebody that wasn't directly impacted by the storm, what you're experiencing is survival guilt. And it is okay to feel gratitude and still acknowledge other people's pain and loss. In fact, feeling gratitude sometimes keeps us quiet versus getting online or getting on the phone and yelling at people, I told you so, or you should have done this, or you should have done that, which is absolutely not helpful in the aftermath of situations like this. So it's okay to feel that gratitude and still acknowledge and still feel the pain and loss of what you're watching, of the people you're surrounded with. Good morning, Dawn. And know that they're not mutually exclusive. It is okay to feel both of those. And sometimes we feel guilty just for feeling gratitude that we weren't impacted in the same way. Good morning, Miss Jen. So there's just a lot of emotional fire going on there, in addition to the damage and the mass cleanup. Good morning, Darren. So just remember that in this case, everybody's perception is a little off. Things can come out like a personal attack that otherwise would not have been considered that. And some people, this is the other thing, some people wear it better than others. Some people are just able to go through something like this and you don't see any kind of visible reaction. They know they're not in control. They're dealing with what they can control. And so it's easy if you run into them in the grocery store or whatever, especially if you are feeling some type of way, to assume that they don't understand and to assume that they're not experiencing what you are. And other attacks kind of happen that way. And that's not always the case. Some people just wear it better. They have more of a fake it till you make it. Nobody else needs to know that I'm suffering type of attitude. And we should not assume in any way, shape, or form that they're not experiencing some kind of loss, guilt, direct impact just because they don't look like they are. So just remember that some people wear it better than others. So there's some coping strategies that we can start to work on in the recovery process. And there's a lot of things going on with recovery, and there's so many facets. And right now there's people, in other states that don't even have the capacity to start to move toward recovery yet because it is in fact so ugly. But when you get to that point, if you're one of those people, if you're in a position to be watching right now, you may not see this till 3 months down the road. There are some coping strategies for recovery. And the first and foremost, and I know this sounds very cliche and not everybody is a fan of this saying, but focus on what you can control. Because the biggest thing for us in situations like this is we feel like everything's completely out of control. So if we can find a little bit of control somewhere, it helps. It's soothing. And that's just the truth. And if that control means cleaning up this 4x4 square of floor, because that's all we can do right now, and that's all we can muster, and we can just get that 4x4 piece of flooring as clean as possible, and kind of scrub the grief and the frustration away, then that's it. Then that's what we do. So we focus on the things we can control, which right now feels very small and very minimal. So one of the things that you can do as coping strategies as you move forward, once you have a place to stay, or you can get back in your home and you're trying to deal with this, or you can even do it on your phone. Your phones, our phones, if you have signal, if you have the ability to charge it, there's online journal apps, and things like that. You can make notes on most of your phones. So even if that journaling doesn't look like breaking out a notebook that, you might not have right now and writing things down, you can journal to help process the emotions. And some prompts might look like, today I feel. So you're focusing just on today and how you feel right now. Or one thing I lost was, so that you can start journaling that loss and starting to come to terms with it. What I miss the most is another good prompt. But the best one, my favorite, is I'm thankful for, because even in the midst of all this destruction, we can still probably find something to be thankful for. An item that we thought was gone, that we discover, or a friend that comes and helps, or even just a text or a phone call from someone checking on us. Those are all, they seem tiny, tiny, tiny at the time, but those are things we can find to be thankful for. Another suggestion that I found was writing symbolic letters to Helene, like you took this, but you didn't get this. And I think that's really productive. Symbolic letters are used as a counseling intervention tool across theories and across methods. Because you've heard these before: write a letter to an ex, write a letter to a parent, write a letter to an abuser, whatever the case may be. Write it out. You don't have to send it. You can burn it. You can keep it. You can shred it. You can rip it into little tiny pieces. Whatever helps you get that out, because right now we're all bottling up a lot of emotion. So those are just some ideas for starting to cope with some of those emotions that are involved in the aftermath of the storm, that internal storm that is dealing with everything right now. Talking about it. If you have friends, I've seen a couple friends on self-care is super important. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more too, Jen. Thank you so much. I've seen a few people in our area who were devastated by the flooding, have talked about, they've already started to trade ideas online, like, I saw this and this might help the next time because it's easier or it's more water resistant. So getting together, believe it or not, talking about things that you might do better next time is a good way to focus on the future and what can be changed. And even small community gatherings, I saw someone suggest that everybody that's been impacted by the storm, once the recovery process is done, get together to talk about things that can be done to help them survive it better or come out of it better the next time. And I think that's fabulous. So community gatherings, community support circles, if you're in an area that's impacted and you have the ability, maybe get together for a few minutes, once a day, once a week, and be like, how are you doing? And just talk to each other, talk to others who are experiencing it face to face if possible. If not, virtual support circles that can go on between those that have power and internet now, that can talk to each other. That peer support is amazing. That peer support is the reason why Wellness Wednesday works, because of your interaction and your tips and tricks that you share with me, just like the ones I share. There's also support groups. Now, in my area, most of the support groups that I'm aware of are grief support groups that deal specifically with loss of a loved one. and NAMI support groups, which have to do with people who are living with mental health conditions or family members. But those mental health conditions don't have to be diagnosed. So if you know you're living with anxiety and depression, and this storm has been like steroids on it, then maybe seek out one of those support areas, different organizations that now do virtual support groups. So again, not everybody has the ability to connect virtually right now, but if you do, that might be something to seek out. Somebody who's licensed, which I'm not licensed yet, might consider starting a hurricane recovery support group that can just get those people together and get them talking. Yes, the neighborhoods, the helping that's going on in our community is amazing. The helping that's starting to happen in the other states is amazing too. And I think it's going to look a lot like ours, Dawn, once they have that ability. Right now, we here locally have the ability for that community pull together. Not everybody is in that situation just yet. So, Jen, you mentioned self-care. And self-care is super important. Before I get on to that, there's also the professional support, which I kind of touched on just a minute ago with the NAMI support groups. NAMI, Red Cross. Red Cross actually has a mental health services department, which I didn't know until yesterday. Crisis hotlines, if you are at that point where you are frozen with the grief and the overwhelm and you just can't even move. And that's a thing. That's, we used to call it fight or flight. Now it's called fight, flight, or freeze. When you become so overwhelmed, your anxiety is so high that you just can't even make a move, can't make a decision, can't do any of that. There's a NAMI helpline. There's crisis hotlines. Red Cross has mental health services. And again, support groups. There's options out there. Find the help, because you can't help yourself or others if you are not in the right place. So with that, let's talk about self-care. Because even though it's hard to imagine when you're cleaning up, inches of water, mud, pieces of your home, it's hard to imagine self-care, but sometimes self-care looks like 5 minutes of deep breathing, like just recognizing that you are overwhelmed, and walking away from it for 5 minutes and just closing your eyes and taking some deep breaths. If that's something any of us can do. Anyone can do, right now, if they can just find that 5 minutes in a corner, or 5 minutes outside if the sun is shining and you're holed up in the dark house trying to clean up. Stretching, taking the small breaks. Sometimes you just have to take a small break, check on the neighbor, check on somebody that's helping to clean up in the other room, whatever the case may be. You can also kind of create a comfort kit. And I like this idea, and I like the idea that maybe somebody in the community or a friend could do that for you, which is something with a little bit of tea, your favorite music, a meaningful photo, something that can be used to create some type of a small ritual, a daily ritual, that provides comfort and a sense of normalcy. I thought that was a fabulous idea. Comfort kits could look like I said, a picture of a loved one, maybe, favorite music. I'm not sure what that would look like in a comfort kit, because we all do MP3s and digital stuff so much now. But some tea, maybe a favorite gum, a snack, an essential oil, something that's calming like lavender, or peppermint, that might just be something that you can just put a tad underneath your nose, or just open the bottle and smell it to just try to relax and encourage that deep breathing. Because those small rituals, even if you can get back to one teeny tiny small ritual that you were doing every day before this storm hit, they provide comfort and they give you some kind of a sense of normalcy. And if you are a helper, we have some amazing helpers in this community. And we have people that they hit the ground running. As soon as all of this happened, they started planning food distributions, and they're out there in the public eye, and they're working 16 hours a day trying to help as many people as they possibly can and figure out how to do it better next time. And they become exhausted too. So even if you're a helper, if you weren't directly impacted and you're the one that's out there helping others remember that you need that self-care too, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So make sure that you take that time, if you're working to the point of exhaustion, to try to help others. And sometimes that comes out of the survivor guilt too. And it's a wonderful thing, but make sure that you don't overdo it yourself, and that you are stopping and taking a break and taking care of you as well. Because you can be that much more effective and impactful, if you are taking care of yourself as well. So one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, there's a lot of kids that are impacted, and in ways that I can't even begin to talk about, or I'm going to be a blubbering idiot. You're not going to understand a word that I say. But helping kids process, is just as important. Thanks, Darren. Good morning, Jean Marie. So helping kids process is just as important. And ironically, I find a lot of the tips that they give for helping kids process, could apply to adults too. So listen carefully on this. Recognizing behavior that indicates that they're struggling, which is they might be extra clingy. They might be regressing. I know that whenever my daughter was sick, she could be 14 years old. She would pull out that Thumbelina VHS cassette and pop it in the VCR when we still had one. And she'd be watching stuff that she hadn't watched since she was 8. So there's regression that happens there for kids. Clinginess and anger outbursts. And I thought, the clinginess and the anger outbursts, can definitely happen with adults too. And regression, sometimes, especially if we're somebody who's lived with a lot of anxiety and depression, and we consider ourselves, good morning, Miss Barber, to be in recovery, and then something like this happens, we regress back to old habits back before we changed our perspective or changed the way we think. And sometimes that negative thought loop represents itself. So recognizing this behavior is extremely important in kids, because sometimes they don't know how to articulate it, but it's something we can see in adults too. So keep that in mind. And again, same thing as with adults. This is where a safe space or some kind of ritual helps with the kids as far as processing. If you can, if you're staying with a friend or whatever, and you can find them a cozy corner, maybe a little tent in the corner, maybe a little blanket fort, sheet fort, like I used to make when I was a kid, where they can kind of hide and have a book or a picture or a favorite toy or whatever, someplace that's just theirs, even if it's, again, like a 4x4 space, that they can sit in, and that's their space. And they can take ownership of it, and it makes them feel cozy and like something is theirs. And again, because kids don't always understand the need to control, but we all have that innate need to control. Good morning, Danielle. So that's a little tiny corner of the world that they can control. That's their space. And they may not know what it is, but they can reap the benefits of that feeling, if that makes sense. So another thing with kids is to communicate clearly and calmly, and that's extremely difficult. Right now, a lot of us can't even communicate because of everything that's going on. But it's really important with kids to focus on that age-appropriate language, and especially safety. Focus on safety. Well, yes, this happened, but we are safe. Our lives are more important than the toys or the books, or that, don't worry, we can find another place to live. We can fix this house. But focus on that language and how it makes the kids feel safe, and focus on pointing out to the children that safety, the fact that they are safe and that they are okay, is one of the most important things, because it also helps to teach them to value the lives over the belongings. It's just, when I say age appropriate language, I don't mean baby talk. I don't mean it's going to be okay, honey. I mean, just talk to them, be real with them, without burdening them with the scariness of what could happen, or what could have happened, and just focus on, we're safe now. It's okay. Everything else is figure outable. Older children can draw, talk. Younger children can color. That's sometimes a release. Drawing with crayons is often used in play therapy. For older children, they can draw. They can talk about their feelings. They can also create a scrapbook. If you had things that you were able to save from the storm, and you do happen to have internet access where photos can be downloaded from from social media or just from random websites, Google, creating a scrapbook of memories to honor things that were lost is a great way for older kids to kind of work through the process. Might also be a great way for you to work through the process. I'm telling you, I find that a lot of these tips are not just kid specific, but we do have to talk about the kids, because this is, as much as all of this devastation is beyond our comprehension, imagine, they're just like, what just happened? It's way beyond their comprehension as well. So the last thing on helping kids process, and again, the same thing I already mentioned with adults, is rebuilding routines as much as you can. And that may not look possible right now, but just something as simple as having one meal at a regular time every single day together, and a regular bedtime helps to recreate and rebuild that sense of stability and predictability that they desperately need. Even as adults, we tend to thrive on routine, whether we want to admit it or not. Kids definitely thrive on routine. And so creating a little bit of sense of stability or predictability for them, even if it's just getting back to one family meal a day, or like I said, a regular bedtime with a bedtime story, can make a huge difference. So, so for those of us that weren't as directly impacted, there's a lot of ways to get involved. And for those of us that may be experiencing a little bit of that survivor guilt, well, we had very little impact. Look at all these people. Where do I begin? How do I help? And sometimes that survivor guilt alone can freeze us. We just feel so overwhelmed and so guilty that we can't figure out how to see, Carla, these are great ideas, and communicating with them and letting them know that you're okay and you appreciate their concern makes a huge difference in that department. So we might not know how to get involved. And we might see other people. Yes, Danielle, routine is sometimes everything for kids. Absolutely. So one of the things that we might see some of these amazing people in the community that are just everywhere. It seems like they're everywhere and they're doing all the things. And we're like, I can't do that. So I can't do anything. And listen, I kind of felt that way a little bit too. Everybody's in their own unique situations, and whether they were directly impacted or not, they're not always able to drop everything. They don't always feel like they can help. They may be afraid to go into areas because they don't know where to start, and they don't want to cause any more problems or be an extra body in the way. So there's a lot of things that can be done. So how can you get involved? Well, first of all, Facebook, especially here locally, is full of groups and people. We have some, I would just call them keyboard warriors in a good way, not in a bad way. I don't want to conjure up any bad images there. I have seen some people online that are literally, it looks to me like they are spending 16 hours a day connecting people to other resources. Oh, you have donations to make? Here's where you can take them. Oh, you need something? Here's where donations are going. And just literally just spending their time connecting people to resources, sharing new information, stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways that you can help if you don't feel capable of going into the front line and, in your rubber boots and helping people clean up. So you can donate supplies. You can cook meals for somebody, even if you have a neighbor that's going out there and physically helping, you could cook a meal for them. That's helping. You can volunteer your time. You can do legwork for someone. One thing that I found myself, I had asked a friend who's on the coast, is there anything I can do to help? And she was like, I will let you know. And when she got back to me, she said, yes, Dawn, they absolutely do. She said, I thought of something. We're going to need a short-term rental. Can you start poking around? And so I did. I mean, literally in an hour's time, I became the keyboard warrior, and I was in the VRBOs, and I was in the Airbnbs, and I was looking at the rental sites, and I was asking questions and connecting with people. That's help. Doing that kind of legwork for somebody that doesn't even have time to pick up their phone because they're looking at all this stuff they have to clean up, or they're trying to figure out what to demo next, which room needs the drywall pulled out next. They need solutions, but they're too much in the moment to come up with those solutions right now. So those are ways that you can help. You can pray. You can circulate vetted information. I say vetted information very specifically because we have a problem right now with a lot of people posting and sharing. Yes, that feeling of unable to do anything, Carla. It's very overwhelming in a situation like this. We have people that are like sharing old information that's not been vetted of storms that are freaking people out even more. So when I say sharing vetted information, I mean vetted information that's helpful. Like information from the Red Cross, from FEMA, from the local Chamber of Commerce, wherever you are, from the local shelters and churches that are helping. Not third and fourth party information that's like within 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon. Make sure that any weather information, especially because it would take very little to put everybody just way over the top and out into orbit. Make sure especially weather information that you're sharing is accurate and up to date, or just don't share it if you can't verify that. So there's a lot of ways that you can help. Good morning, Miss Ann. Small acts of kindness go a long way. If you can do some laundry for somebody, one of the biggest needs I have seen is people with bags and bags of clothes, and they can't use their washer and dryer because their power's out or the power's back on, but they haven't been able to flip that main breaker back on yet. Clothes are going to mold. They can't afford to buy new ones. So if you have an empty washer and dryer and you can go pick up those clothes from somebody and wash them, that's a way that you can help. If you can pay for them to drop it off at a laundry service, if laundry's not your thing, but you can afford to pay for a wash, dry, fold service for 3 or 4 of their bags, that is huge. Babysitting, running errands, just the simple act of checking in with people, and making sure they're okay and asking what they need. And a lot of times people are prideful. They're going to be like, no, we're okay. We've got it. But just the act of you checking in makes such a huge difference. So those are some ways that you can get involved. If you don't have the physical ability, then you can absolutely donate monetarily. But again, I advise caution and make sure you're donating to a vetted source. There's a lot of, very assuredly, that some of them are real. In my activewear business, I have sister reps who have experienced complete devastation, and other people on their in their circle have started GoFundMe accounts for them. But make sure you know, if you're donating to a GoFundMe account, make sure you know who's organizing it. Make sure you vetted that. Make sure you know where that money's going. There's other ways to do it too. Samaritan's Purse is really stepping up, especially in the states outside of Florida that are just in dire need right now. The Carolinas, Samaritan's Purse is really stepping up. I don't know if they're in Florida. They probably are. I just have heard more in the last couple days. I've heard more about outside of Florida than I have about inside of Florida. Samaritan's Purse is definitely, they're bringing in truckloads of stuff, supplies, gas, all kinds of things. Again, vetted GoFundMe accounts, your local United Way, any of the local churches that are doing supply organization, provide the community, the food banks. Here locally, we have like Daystar. We've got some churches that are getting involved in food distributions. Those are the places you can look at donating money to, and having some kind of knowledge that it's going to go locally and it's going to help the people that you want it to help. Good morning, Miss Stacy. And then of course, I can't, even though this is more about the emotional recovery, I cannot stress enough, my former life, 21 years as executive officer for a local builders association. When you start having repairs done, people, for your own emotional sanity, make sure you're using someone that's licensed and insured. Get with your local builders association, building alliance, contractors association, whatever that looks like in your area, or your local chamber of commerce, and make sure that you are there. Unfortunately, are people who are scavenging off of this. They are not licensed. They are they are seeing it as an opportunity to make money, and that's not okay. And even there are some people that are helping that just don't have the right knowledge, and it could actually end up costing you more down the road. So if you must have repairs done, and you can't do them yourselves and pull an owner builder permit, please, please, please make sure that you are using someone who is licensed, insured, and reputable, and contact those organizations that can connect you to those people. Okay, so that's enough of that. So these are just some ways. I hope you find this helpful, or that somebody in your world, if you share it, will find it helpful, because this is the emotional side that not a whole lot of people are talking about right now. There's something like this kind of devastation can cause PTSD. So it's important to recognize, as much as you will let yourself, that you're having these emotions and to deal with them in some sort of way that is helpful and appropriate. So a few things to remember about this before I sign off. Everyone has something valuable to contribute, whether it's you from home doing the keyboard warrior thing, helping to connect people to resources or find somebody something. Everyone has something valuable to contribute, and it's not required for it to be publicly visible. Lots of people every single day contribute. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody really sees them except for the person they're helping directly. It doesn't have to be publicly visible on every level for you to be of help. Don't be discouraged if you can't do this level of help, because this level of help is just as important. Okay, that's one important thing I want everybody to remember. Give grace to yourself and to others, whether you're in the situation or you're watching the situation. Give grace to yourself and to others. Recovery from a disaster like this is a long process, and everybody has, like I said when I started, just a myriad of emotions. They have their own emotional storm that's going on in the aftermath. So give grace. I posted a couple things about this, and a friend of mine also posted, and then went back and a couple days later and said, let's try this again because I need the reminder too. So that person had posted about giving each other grace, and then found themselves in a position where they were judging and not giving grace, and was like, okay, I need this reminder as much as anybody else. So give grace to yourself, to others. Remember what I said earlier. If somebody's wearing it well, don't assume that they're not suffering. Right now, I don't think it's fair for us to assume anything at all, other than the fact that people need grace and kindness and help. Focus on small wins. Whether you're in the situation or you're watching the situation, focus on small wins. Small wins might look like, as I mentioned earlier, finding something you thought was lost. Reconnecting with friends you haven't talked to in a while because they checked on you. Or just making that little bit of time to rest. And then just this last thing that I will leave you with is that the storm may have taken a lot, but it hasn't taken our community spirit, and it hasn't taken our humanity. And we're seeing that every single minute of every single day. So let's support each other together. And above all else, let's be kind. Okay, with that said, please take care of each other. And we'll see you next week. In the meantime, be well. Bye.